Shall we start over again? Okay. I wanted to begin by saying that not only is Jesus' statement in the parable a parable, but it's also historical. When he talks about their cities being burned and destroyed, in fact, Jerusalem in 70 AD is destroyed. It's burned and sacked by the Romans. And so, even though this is a parable, there's a prophecy built inside of this parable. But there's a more interesting aspect to this parable. And I started to tell you about a famous story about Ralph and Stella. And Ralph and Stella are the typical couple, and you probably know Ralph and Stella. Ralph would describe himself as being spiritual, but he didn't go to church. And Stella went to church religiously, every Sunday, all of the feast days, and so on. And she would often invite Ralph along. And Ralph's response was always the same. Oh, honey, you go ahead. You go to church for both of us. And so sadly, the two of them died in the same plane crash. And they arrive in heaven. Of course, Stella gets to the gate running. And Peter sees her coming, and he goes out and welcomes her and hugs her and says, oh, Stella, it's so good to see you here. And he starts to invite her in. And Ralph starts to walk in behind. And Peter goes, wait a minute, we need to talk. And he said, and Ralph starts to stutter something, and he says, Ralph, I know, you're spiritual. I get that. So we've made a compromise. We're going to let Stella in for both of you. Isn't that the truth, right? We're going to let Stella in for both of you. In this story today, there's two parts. First, it comes the invitation. And everybody is invited to church. I know a lot of people that say, I'm spiritual or I'm Catholic, but I don't go to church. Well, you're invited. Everybody's invited. The door is open to everybody. We have homeless people. We have non-Catholics that walk into our church during Mass. All are invited. But our society has become where so many people don't go to church, even though they still consider themselves Catholic. Ron Rolheiser, one of our great Catholic writers, once said, he says, I don't think people are leaving the Catholic Church. I just don't think they go to them. And maybe that's very much the truth, that somewhere deep inside, like Ralph, they still consider themselves Catholic, or consider themselves spiritual. But they don't feel a need to come to church. The second half of the story is the whole preparation part, is coming with some kind of, preparation. I have the benefit or the misfortune, depending, of being able to sit up there, so I always know I'm being watched, so I can't ever, nod off or do anything, right? Because everybody can see you. But I get to see everything that goes on out here. I get to see the people that come late, the people that leave early, the people that are on their phones. Fortunately, they don't usually go off. But it's this very much of, come late, leave early, as long as I'm there. There's people have asked me, well, when is it valid? They'll ask, when is Mass valid? Which is really a question of, how late can I get there? How late can I get there for it to be valid? I heard a pastor one time, when somebody asked him that question, said, well, were you there in time for the offertory? Right? Then it's valid. You paid your offering, so it's valid. So the question is coming prepared and being ready to worship God. Because that's what this is all about, is worshiping God. The other thing about weddings is weddings are celebratory, right? We hope. Jesus' first miracle was a wedding. And the big problem there wasn't enough booze, right? There wasn't enough wine. It's a great celebration. That's what Mass is a celebration. And somehow we don't see it that way. We come and it's some kind of, being laid upon us. So we're not only called to show up, but be prepared as well. Somebody once said to me, I'm a football coach, you need to suit up and show up. And that's what we're called to do at Mass. Years ago, and Deacon Emil will appreciate this, when I was in formation to be a deacon, I had to go do service work. And I had never worked in a homeless kitchen. So I got sent to a homeless kitchen with a friend of mine, Deacon Brian. And of course, I immediately gravitated to being behind the table, right, where I could serve. And I had it down. I had a number 4 scoop in my hand and a ladle. And I could get a perfect dome of potatoes with the right amount of gravy in one move. You know, like one smooth, I was like a ninja with gravy and potatoes. And I was sitting here doing this, just feeling good about myself. Here I was, feeding the homeless, doing the right thing, and all of this stuff. And Brian comes over and taps me on the shoulder. I go, what? He goes, I need you to do something. I said, I'm doing the potatoes and gravy. He goes, no, I need you to do something. He replaced me with 2 Cub Scouts. 2 Cub Scouts were doing what I was doing, which brought me down a couple notches to begin with. I go, well, what do you want me to do? I figured it was something important, like, you know, be in charge of the kitchen or something. He said, I want you to go get a plate of food and go over to that table and eat. What? I want you to get a plate of food and go over to that table and eat. I said, I don't understand. He said, just do what I tell you. So I got my plate of food and I headed toward the empty table next to the table full of homeless people. And Brian goes, no. Go to the table with the homeless people. You want me to eat with them? Yeah, I want you to eat with them. You're sure? Yeah, I want you to eat with them. So I sat down with them and started to eat. And of course, it was awkward to begin with, as it always is. It's awkward when you meet a new person at any time. And this one couple that I thought were married turned out to be brother and sister. And they had owned a family home, a beautiful family home in Simi Valley. But between paying the expenses for caring for their mother in that home, and then a couple of medical turns on themselves and a lost job, they lost everything, and they were homeless. They tell us that all of us are only about 2 steps away from homelessness. I mean, it's not like some far off. We're about 2 steps away from homelessness. And as I continued to hear the story about this brother and sister, I realized that I was talking to me. That it was not some alien person or some drug addict or any of these things that I had stereotyped, but they were regular people. And they told me about living in a storage container, that a guy knew that they were there but just really didn't say anything, and how it was cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but they couldn't open the doors because they didn't want anybody to know they were there, and they didn't want the light to come out. And every week after that, when I went to the homeless kitchen, I sat down with that brother and sister. And they became my friends. And I think I became their friend. My brothers and sisters, Jesus calls us not just to show up physically, but to come with the right attitude, to come to Mass with the right attitude, to go into the world with the right attitude, to encounter people with the right attitude. And I think we'll find that not only will we do a great benefit for them by doing that, but we will do a great benefit for us. And unlike Ralph, when we get to heaven, Peter will say, "Welcome home, good and faithful servant."